I think the easiest aspect in a way is the soldier at the edge, the warrior. If you bring them a capability they need and find valuable, they'll use it. That's the that's it. It's very simple. As long as it works and better than what I have, I'm going to use it.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spyro Circle, brought to you this time in collaboration with Forbes Israel. I've been speaking to a lot of people recently about defense tech, and those who have been following my work for a few years know that it's been a top interest of mine ever since October 7 and how Israel responded to the war against it. Now, there's a symbiosis that's currently in play where people go to the army, they learn about technologies and industries, they then bring out that knowledge and they produce private companies that are the solutions to some of those problems. I've well documented it. You can catch any of my previous work on it. Anyway, today I spoke to eyesAtop, which is a drone company, and they kind of walk this line between the software needs and the hardware needs of defense. Because the more you think about it, the more those lines are blurring. I spoke to CEO Udi Oster all about it, and we spoke about how companies can do business with different countries and different regions. We spoke about the need for defense capabilities and how things get updated and how soldiers need to change. And it was generally just a very interesting conversation. So I hope you enjoy. Udi, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for hosting me.
I'm super excited to hear all about the company and your journey and some of the ways that all of that fits into modern day defense tech and where Israel is finding itself these days. But before we dive into it, why don't you give, please, an overview for those who are watching or listening, just a bit about eyesAtop and what you folks do, please.
In a modern warfare, as we've experienced everywhere, you have drones from multiple manufacturers, multiple types of drones and platforms, robotics, and so forth. And at the moment, in most places, the way people operate is one-to-one relationship. So you have one operator operating one drone. What eyesAtop is providing is an AI native universal controller that is platform agnostic, which means from one controller, you're able to control and operate and orchestrate multiple types of platforms, regardless the manufacturer, regardless what platform it is, which allows you to scale the use of those platforms in the industry. We've been operating in Israel even pre-October 7. And since then, we're the program of record for the AI native universal controller. So every reconnaissance team and basically every unit in the IDF that operates drones, which means every unit almost in general, has our universal controller, which allow them to operate multiple types of drones and achieve multiple type of missions, reconnaissance, attack, logistics, and so forth. And that's kind of what we do.
Wow, it's really interesting. And I'm so used to hearing that kind of analogy, but in the context of software engineers and the fleet of AI agents that they are managing as opposed to teams of human software engineers. So it's super interesting to hear it in a different context. Tell me a bit about where the bottleneck is before you folks come in with this solution. So is that in the hardware side of things, the software side of things, or is it a regulation, military issue or problem? I don't know.
It's a great question. And up until maybe 3 years ago, I myself wasn't really much aware of what's happening in the defense industry. And to answer your question, simply, it's everything you can imagine. So the pace of technology in the defense industry has moved now dramatically faster than the capability and ability of the defense industry to adopt it. Okay, so think like military, like the IDF or others. Now, in the past, 5 years, the technology that you could use in the battlefield, from dual use to actually military purpose technology, is evolving so much faster than the old ages of the industry. So if you think of like a new type of weaponry system, in the past, the cycles would be, say, between 5 to 10 years to have from development to kind of beta testing it, field deployment, and then full-scale development. That's kind of the cycles, right? And it includes bureaucracy. It includes kind of setting up the manufacturing facility, the R&D investment, and so forth. Okay, NRE as it used to be, and that's kind of the pace of evolution. And today, all these things are breaking. So if you think of like all the drones we use today in the IDF, almost none of them existed 2 years ago, right? A lot of the drones are being used today are new ones. You can see also from the amount of companies that are popping up, right? This is the same to say in Ukraine and other places that have like engaging in battle. The software that control those drones, the AI models that allows you to identify things, did not exist 2 years ago. A lot of the things we built that are now deployed at full scale deployment have been developed maybe a month ago. So the entire pace of evolution is changing. I'll give you another example of a huge challenge. If you think of the old way of storing weaponry system and munition, because one of the challenges of armies is you need to make sure you have enough in stock. So when inflection happens, you're quickly able to kind of take out from the, warehouses, storage facilities and get it into action, right? This is always hard, but if you think of like munitions, and you have like it's called like the SOW, like the statement of affairs, like what do you need to have. So with munition systems, say each munition you buy needs to be able to be stored in dry facility for 20 years, right? So you put it there, and you have one guy visit once a year, checking that nobody kind of stole anything, and that's one element. Now take it for drones, okay? Drones, again, the technology evolving every time, just like you have your iPhone. So think of taking an iPhone, putting it in a dry storage facility for 20 years, opening it up afterwards, like nothing, would work. The battery, the lithium-ion battery won't be relevant. The firmware won't work. Maybe the networking that it used to communicate over the cellular towers won't be relevant at that point. It's like using 2G, and now there's no 2G. So nothing is really relevant. And if the military now want to be able to procure and manage drones in masses, how do you even go about it? Like who stores it? Who updates the firmwares? Who makes sure that it works when I need it? So it's really the entire chain is broken. Another example of that is because there's a variety of platforms that you want to use in the military, locking into one vendor with one platform, whether it be Elbit or other companies, it doesn't really matter, is also something that in today's world is very difficult, because it might be that Elbit's code name or other companies build the best drone of type A, but there's a variety of platforms that want to use. Some of them might be developed by Anduril or by other companies. So even in that case, you wouldn't want to kind of locking yourself into one vendor for the foreseeable future. You want to have the flexibility to get the best technology at the point of time of interest and use it immediately. So
So are your
training,
customers, sorry to cut you off there, so are your customers, the people you work with, are they the manufacturers themselves, or are they the military units? Where do you fit into this?
yeah, we work directly with the military units. Okay, so procurement is like kind of a big there's a big element of who exactly you work with the military. But think of it like the procurement department of the military. This is the main customer of ours. And we tell them we're going to bring you the best technology that is out there that fits your needs. We'll make sure it operates through a universal controller that you can train on once. We'll make sure that all these platforms will enjoy all the AI capabilities and models you built or we built or a third-party company built once on all the platforms. And at any point in time, you'd be able to select whichever platforms you want, or we'll help you bring whichever best platform you have around the globe in the hands of the warfighters with the minimum friction possible. So if a drone operator that got drafted into the army 2 years ago was using whatever, an Auto Evo drone or an Elbit drone or whatnot, and since then, things have evolved, new companies came in, we now bring him a new drone. From their eyes perspective, almost everything is similar because the universal ability controller is the same. The capability is used to is the same. The platform may have changed and has some more features, but out of that, everything kind of plays together. That's where we fit. We work with the manufacturer of the platform providers, and we help integrate that with capability that we need, whether it's for the IDF or for the US military, and bring that into the end customer, which is the defense, the defense industry, and specifically the units in the warrior at the edge.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like you kind of want to become the universal operating system for drones. So it doesn't really matter what company or what unit or anything where the soldier is or where the operator is, they lock in and they already understand it. And I can speak from not a military, but obviously background, but as a consumer, I mean, I can't stand it when updates have to change or I move offices and I have to get familiar with different operating systems. So I certainly understand it. Talk to me a bit about the human pain points that you may see that affect that, right? So are people as annoying as I am? Like, do they resist the change that you've described so much, or is it kind of more of a convenience? Talk to me through about the impact that operating different drones on different systems from different places may have on warfare or in conflict.
I think there's a lot of constituents when you think of this kind of a problem. This is why it's in a way so much harder to penetrate and work through as a startup company versus the private market. It's like my previous job was there. We were a co-founder of a startup company in Silicon Valley, living the dream. Working in the defense industry has a different dream that you live by for sure, but has a lot more difficulties in working with the different constituents that you need to work with. So I think the easiest aspect in a way is the soldier at the edge, the warrior. If you bring them a capability they need and find valuable, they'll use it. That's that's it. It's very simple. As long as it works and better than what I have, I'm going to use it. So the main question isn't, is it perfect? Is it the best possible? Whatever. It's in my hands right now. I have an M4 rifle gun. I have a few grenades, and I have an old archaic drone. If what you bring me is better than these ones and it allows me to achieve more types of missions or achieve the missions I already have in a better way, saving lives, protect my life, I'm going to use it. So those are kind of the easiest one. A lot of times in big militaries, those customers don't have the purchasing power. There's a different department who's like procurement who needs to decide basically what things are being procured to those soldiers. Israel has a big benefit because a huge piece of our army, a huge part of the army is reservists, which means like regular people like me and you, and half the company in eyesAtop, who basically at time of need are being called into the army from the private life, and they are growing in a private market, so they know what is available out there. There would be less. They would rely less on the rules of the military and kind of bring whatever technology they think is useful. And a lot of times, a lot of the startup companies in Israel recently in the defense industry came from reservists that went to the military, fought in Gaza and Lebanon, and had an idea, built it while they were in reserve, and then trying now and make it like a big company. So, so that's kind of a benefit. So we're talking about the edge soldier. We were talking about the procurement department. And then you have a lot of bureaucracy that goes along with it. How do you prove it to be safe? How do you go and kind of go get all the certifications and so forth? I think this is relatively challenging in the industry because the evolution isn't just on the technology side. You really need to evolve the way you procure weapons. And when I talked about the cycles of I invest X amount of money for Y amount of years to like a kind of an NRE, like an R&D investment to build a system of choice that I think is kind of the best in class. It takes 5 years. Afterwards, I get a few better versions, test it out in the field, make some adjustment. And then so that the cycle is 7 years. In today's world, this is like impossible. And maybe in a simpler way to put it, before, if I'm telling you, like take a regular product, like a company, I tell you, look, whatever you're going to build is going to take 7 years, right? So think really carefully what you're asking for. What you'll do is you'll intuitively basically have as many people as possible being the product manager who writes the spec of the system that will take 7 years to build. And we'll try and think of all the edge cases that are possible in the future. It'll be like freezing cold suddenly in Israel. It'll be like super hot. It'll be like whatever. There's GPS. There's no GPS. There's any type of permutation of things you can imagine because it's so expensive to build it, right? So you need to make sure it kind of fits all kind of archaic, even esoteric scenarios. And then you'll give it to a company and say, this is the spec I've built. How much will it cost me to build it? Okay. And the only companies who can actually accommodate these types of crazy specs that a lot of them are practically irrelevant would be the big, what's called like prime contractors. They have big pockets from Elbit to Lockheed Martin, Boeing, whatever, all these kind of big contractors. And they not even measured, again, in the old days, not even measured or the success of the products, right? They're measured on basically being paid cost plus. They say, look, these are the amount of engineers that want to work on, I think we should have put on this project. And I'll charge you, this is how much an engineer costs, and I'll charge you cost plus. So the incentive structure is almost opposite of a startup company. The longer it takes, the more people are involved, the more money I make as a contractor, right? Um, and when you are a startup company, you're like, I don't have time for all these specs. I have money left for 2 years tops, usually in the VC rounds. So I need to build a product based on what I think the Edge Warrior needs and try and have a complete product, so an almost complete product that I then sell to the procurement department as the thing they need. I can't go through the full cycle of 7 years development and I'm not equipped to do that. And that change in mentality isn't just it needs to happen not just in the Edge Warrior on the edge, but also through the military system, the procurement of how they do it. So I think that's kind of one of the biggest difficulties is how do you sell a finished product or almost finished product to procurement department that are used to do some other things? How are you pricing it? It's another quite big question, and so forth.
It's so interesting, and you touched on so many different aspects of defense tech, which I've been following for a couple of years, obviously since October 7 and before, and a lot of my previous episodes and my writing have discussed the sector and how it's grown specifically out of Israel and some of the symbiotic relationship between, as you mentioned, those folks who serve in the military and then bring their experience out and kind of dive into the private sector to manufacture solutions to the problems they identify. It's a well-known kind of loop cycle. But if we're going to double tap into that and some of the ways that you've been describing what eyesAtop does and then its place in the military and alongside some of these larger manufacturers, what can you tell me about what you think the state of defense tech is looking like nowadays? You mentioned it changed over the last couple of years. Is it becoming more software based, or is it still traditionally held in the hardware manufacturing areas? What can you tell me about some of the changes you've seen in the sector?
I think that the challenge in high level, first, there's two tracks that are happening across the globe. One is the notion that you can't much rely on supply chains or other countries, so you want to move as many of the critical manufacturing facilities in-house. And the other aspect of manufacturing is a lot of the weapons you saw in the past is, something you buy once, like the way they thought of drones in Israel, say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, was a very expensive piece of equipment, kind of like a smaller version of a fighter jet airplane. It will cost a lot of money and will be reusable as many times as needed. And now they think of it as munition, okay, based on what happened in the war. Whether you use it once and kind of done, like kind of attack drones, FPV drones and so forth, whether you use it a few times and you're done, like indoor drones, or, a few times a year. But in general, the notion that cost matters and your ability to manufacture a lot of them matter as well. That's on the hardware piece, and it happening. We see it in Israel, we see it obviously in the US, and we see it in every almost country that is capable. They want to be able at the end to build, they start with the most attritable drones. So like say the FPV attack drones, they want to bring their capability of building it and manufacture it in-house. And that's like almost like the plastic and the motors and whatever they need to kind of assemble it together. And that's one trend, and I don't see it stopping at all. So if you even not coming from software or tech, but you have a good notion or ability to manufacture, you think of new ways to do it cheaply and kind of ramp up the speed of manufacturing, I think you have a lot of opportunity right now in almost any country that think of be preparing for the world to come. So that's on the, say, hardware side or manufacturing side. On the other side of the equation, you have a dramatic increase in software. And when you think of it at the end, it's called like robotic autonomous systems. The autonomy piece, there's a question of who builds it. And if I build it in one platform, can I reuse it in somewhere else? We are software first. So one of the ideas behind what we build is I want to take out the brain or most of the brain from the platform. So you can focus and build the best platform cheaply in masses, wherever that may be. But the brain layer, the operating system, so-called, will be one that you can build once and enjoy that across the different platforms. And whether we build it ourselves, which is what we do mostly, or integrate other AI companies that have the best, whatever, visual motion detection models or whatnot into our platform, that's gonna to be discussed. But I think there's also a huge amount of opportunity there. In the past, you couldn't really, if you had like a very good AI model that you built, or a software piece, doesn't have to be AI, even though it's obviously cool and preferred right now. A very good algorithm or software that you built, your ability to get it into the military without also bringing a whole solution like a hardware or going through the primes and kind of sell it for the nickel was nearly impossible. In today's world, because of having so many robots from so many manufacturers, those doors are now open. So I believe you'll see many more companies focusing on specific algorithms that are relevant for the battlefield and have liaisons, whether it's eyesAtop or others, that let them kind of get it fielded. So I think both tracks are kind of evolving really rapidly these days.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. And then, so when we consider that, the side by side hardware and software and how they complement each other or work alongside each other, where does a company like eyesAtop or any other kind of smaller, more local Israeli company, where do they come into play when it comes to the big giants like the US, right? So are they the companies that over there, or maybe potential customers over there, are they customers? Are they partners? Are they competitors? Like, where do you see the landscape growing, either for you folks as a company, but also maybe in any partnerships or alliances around the world? What do you think is happening?
Very good question, and I think it would be what is a mistake? It would be not so accurate to put the U.S. in the same bucket as Singapore or the Emirates or Azerbaijan or basically a lot of other countries. And I believe in that's kind of what we do as a company as well. U.S. has its own kind of a turf, its own position, its own strategy. It owns more than, everybody knows it, more than 50% of the entire budget for defense in the world goes to the U.S. So thinking of U.S. isn't like, oh, this is for Israel. It's not like, oh, that's another market we should try and go after. I think if you go to the U.S., you have to have a strategy for the U.S. specifically, because everything there is a bit different. eyesAtop specifically is basically a U.S. company. My co-founder, Daniel, is a U.S. citizen. He happened to make an aliyah to Israel to serve in 8200 with me, the intelligence. And after that, we found a company moving back to the U.S. So eyesAtop is a U.S. company. We have a U.S. base. And I think that helps us a lot in the first steps of integrating into the U.S. And there, I believe, at least initial stage for us, and I'll talk about US and then other countries, the initial stage is we built an amazing a brain layer. And this AI brain also was trained on real data, which is another huge problem when you build in defense. A lot of times you have nothing to show or test in real life. And then when real life happens, a battle like October 7 and others, or Ukraine, you find the tech that you've invested billions of dollars in basically become useless. And I'm not going to name, but there's a lot of company that built X amount of, whether it's the platform or software, and then in real life, it became not as useful. So we have this brain layer that was trained, more than 500,000 hours in battle in Israel. And we want to bring this brain into the US to meet the US concept of operations. So with the US platforms, the Blue List platform, whatever is being used to kind of enjoy that. So that's the first strategy we have with the US. Basically, we also have our first deal there, but like whether we work with SOCOM or other constituents within the US Defense Ministry, and then operate and integrate with different platforms that are in use. So that's kind of the strategy of us into the US. With other countries, a bit different. One option is really to sell, like we do, the middleware that allows you to integrate different type of platforms. Another one is to say, we'll come up, and that's what we do in Israel. we'll bring you the whole kind of full kit solution. So we know what type of a concept of operation you need. Let's say you have a reconnaissance team, and that's your, that's kind of what you're after. We'll bring you the best reconnaissance team kit for reconnaissance units in your military, and we'll choose the best technology in the world. So if you want to use your FPV, we'll integrate your FPV. If you want to bring the best ones, we'll bring the best ones. We'll bring the best drones. We'll have one universal controller. We'll integrate into your, C4I systems that you built in house, and we'll provide you a whole kit. And I think for almost most of the countries outside of the US, this is a great entry point for Israeli companies as well as eyesAtop, because they lack the infrastructure and the R&D budgets even to get to the same type of level as Israel and the US. So I think that you should look at these countries differently. US almost in one bucket, and then you have almost everything, other global countries. Even theirs is obviously tiers, but I would look a bit differently.
And then you probably also have like blocks, right? So you probably have like the EU would probably be, for example, a different block, and than China or any other region. You have many different players, so to speak. So I guess it's quite a balancing act. When it comes to dual use and some of the nature of the technologies that are being developed in the defense tech sector, so it's got military capabilities, but also civilian use cases. Is that an area that you folks are interested in at all, or are you solely focused on military?
So we're stuck with military as a specific kind of a use case. Then you go to HLS. So that's a homeland security, firefighting, and so forth. And then you can go to more of a commercial space. All of it is interesting. I think the route where eyesAtop initially starting, if I go back to what you asked about what's changing in the world, the fact that you now need to develop, like basically produce and manufacture many systems and platform at scale in a kind of a relatively cheaply or like in a cost-effective way means that going to the dual use technologies where there's massive markets that isn't dependent upon geopolitical changes of war here and war there, they keep on manufacturing drones or drones could be like cameras or whatever that may be, because they have the private market and the ability to take that piece that has a steady, relatively steady growing need in the private market and make the necessary adjustment to use it for military use. I think that's like a key element. And one of the things we specialize in is working with those companies and get their technology with hardware accessories that we build and with software that we build fit the battlefield. And that makes it basically that bridge allows militaries like Israel and others enjoy the private market in a military kind of constraints. So I think there's, right now with the global, different wars and the global tension, there's a lot of moves from that side of the equation. So the folks that focus on private markets into defense versus vice versa. I think when things, if things and when things come down, you'll probably see some kind of movement back. If that makes sense.
How are current political, sorry, not just political, how are current geopolitical conflicts or tensions impacting you folks, if at all, either in Israel or the States?
Yeah, I think so current is a nice way to put it, because current is changing every month. There's a different kind of geopolitical.
It's probably going to be different by the time this episode releases. Your answer's probably going to be different.
Yeah, so I'll try and I'll take one step back, like just the macro, and give a sense to folks. So after October 7, we kind of wanted to get deep, and I guess like a lot of Jewish folks in the world, we wanted to make sure that we put as much investment as possible in helping Israel first, and then the West or our allies second. And hopefully make sure it's not pro bono, because want to make sure like it's something we can sustain over time versus like do some kind of a nice thing for a few months. And we were considering whether we should like get into a company, buy a company, bootstrap a company in the defense sector, or go and fundraise. And if you think of fundraising, now almost like 3 years ago to defense, I think it was nearly impossible in the world. The US was a little bit more advanced They have like drone dominance and some other kind of the replicator program. But in Israel, you wouldn't find a single, almost, I would say, talk for myself, almost a single investor like big VC wouldn't put money in defense sector. You want to be more righteous than the Pope in Israel. So like generally you don't want to touch defense. Definitely not if you're an Israeli VC. You're like the last thing you want is paint yourself as like more Israeli than others. Um, Today, because of what's happening here, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the US, what's happening, in Europe in general, almost every country in the world investing way more money into defense, and they also understand that the biggest primes they have cannot really provide the needs of today's. So a huge chunk, a huge chunk of this funding will go and is going to smaller companies that are now kind of like flourishing. So one thing, just from economical standpoint, the ability today to think of an idea or a solution to a gap that the warrior feels at the edge or the countries feel on the border, raise funds and get to a point where you can actually field your product is like exponentially easier and better than it used to be. And I think this is one of the reasons why, if you think, obviously, you put AI on one side, you have like cyber on the other. I think defense from like maybe number, I don't know, 20 in the list of what's interesting topics to invest in today, pop to like number 2, number 3, well, one of the top 3 for sure. And I think this has all happened recently. Another big shift that happened is not just about funding. And this is what we've experienced on October 7. We see Ukraine as well. And I talked about logistics, the reliance on foreign countries to supply your weapons at time of needs is now shifted dramatically. So almost every country, if you're thinking big, that you want to sell into at some point would request to have a local presence and kind of stronghold, the ability to kind of manufacture regardless of what your country will decide. And in Israel, we've seen it with France. Even today, we've seen it even with the Biden administration in the past. Um, and I think in Israel post October 7, there's also a huge chunk of funding would go to make sure that whatever we build or invest in has the resiliency to sustain geopolitical movements while we are at war. And this is true for, again, other countries as well.
It's true for other countries. It's also true for other industries, right? It's not just defense. It's also chip manufacturing and silicon development. And, there's the broader issue that you mentioned about just kind of taking control over your supply chain is really appropriate, not just in the context that we're speaking in today, but I mean, there's been talks for years about, you saw it during COVID, or you can see it now with the conflict with Iran and some of the Strait of Hormuz being closed and the supply chain issues that come of it.
I think it's fascinating because it's almost like we talked about it in the company recently. You have on one hand the AI evolution that everybody, maybe the software engineers and so forth, are scared that their jobs are going to be gone. Even in our company, the team size, in the past for Silicon Valley was like the pizza rule, right? You have like a team, you have like a PM, and then up to 7 or 10 people that can eat like one pizza, like one pizza at a time. So that's the size of a team. Today, our teams could be 2 people, like a PM and a kind of a tech lead, and mostly whether you're using cloud code or whatnot. So there's like, if we were saying we'll need way less engineers because of this AI revolution. On the other hand, the concept of globalization, and my supply chain will be, I'll just build that piece or put it together, and then all the countries in the world will work miraculously nicely together to supply this. This also kind of moving back. So every country almost want to bring more industrialization into the country, manufacturing facilities and so forth. So I can see also in our company, there is now a growing demand for skilled labor, actually putting screws together, building the hardware, 3D printing, putting it together, quality assurance, and so forth. Jobs that almost got extinct from Israel, and I think the same is happening in the US, are now again flourishing. You have like huge company that their main specialty is, I'm going to build the biggest manufacturing facility. So I think it's very interesting, almost balancing each other out. Anyhow, so just this is like those both movements. I think is interesting.
No, it's super interesting, and the world has a way of figuring itself out. Because you're right. Everyone thought everyone's going to lose their jobs, and one of my favorite expressions is, when the light bulb was invented, a lot of candle makers went out of business, but the world got the light bulb, and then there's candle makers. Sure, there are fewer candle makers, but the jobs change, right? And the needs from having now a light bulb change, and the
Yep.
consequences of a world with a light bulb changes. So it's I used to be quite a doomer when it came to things like that, and now I'm a bit more optimistic because, as you were saying, jobs change, positions change, and skills become kind of realigned, which is super
James,
interesting.
as one who lives in Israel, you cannot be a doomer. There's too many. You must kind of lean on the more optimistic side of things. Things will be good at the end for sure.
So let's talk about that then. Let's talk about what optimism looks like for a company that is in defense tech, because the ultimate optimist would say that the future has no war and no conflict, and we're all in peace. What does success, or what does an optimistic future look like for you guys? Is it the need for no more drones? Is it world peace, or is it that everyone is manufacturing their and operating their own drones? Like, what is it? What's the end goal for
I think there's almost like philosophical aspects to what you mentioned. I think just in the macro, peace is best preserved when there is deterrence, and deterrence happens when you have the best technology, and the best weaponry system and the most sophisticated, strong army that no one else want to kind of challenge that. And the biggest that gap is, the more peaceful our lives would be. So I think I don't believe there is any world in the foreseeable future that that piece won't be needed because we're all going to share the same exact value set in the entire global, entire on Earth. So that's why I don't believe that peace or not peace, the need to have the most advanced technology and weaponry system and the most advanced army exists. I think with regards like taking one step, like a high resolution, one step down, for our company and many of the companies that operate in this world, um, in the past, you'd measure armies by how big they are. If you read books about Second World War, First World War, it's like too big. You'll talk about how big the military were. Like they have 6 million people, like everything, like massive numbers. With the entry of robotic systems and then autonomous robotic systems, you basically extend the human being, and now instead of operating, 5 people with a scout and so forth, you have one person operating 3 drones. And then the company that you have, instead of having a whole company, each company, kind of like we see in the private market with engineers, you have 2 people that will have rifles and everything, but they would operate a company of robotic systems. And we see it happening. Okay. It doesn't like the shift doesn't look like tomorrow morning you have like we call like a ghost squad or a ghost company, which is basically a fully autonomous robotic company that just goes, but you're already seeing it happening. So the question of size of military as a deterrent systems will go lower, because one aspect of the size of the military would be how many robots, how fast can you produce more robots, and how small those robot systems are. And that's
Mm.
exactly where we play. We let you build those ghost squads with the human being in the loop, and scale it as fast as possible. So I think any company who focuses on these areas in this kind of a future that I just described will have a lot of room to flourish. That's kind of my opinion. Drones maybe being like the first bird that gonna show it, but you have basically any types of robotics that we can see. Well, I think will evolve into it.
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with that worldview as well, and I think that it applies in many different areas, right? It's not just like the idea of drones and warfare, but it's also the idea that, as what you mentioned about kind of sharing values, and that kind of that's when peace would, it's not putting the weapons down per se, but it's like the shared collective achievement of kind of values and respect and all of that. So there are loads of different directions that I could take that in, but it's not kind of relevant to our conversation. I don't want to get too abstract. But there are loads of ways that I kind of agree with that as well. I think it's great. Udi, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'm afraid we could talk forever about all of this and the some of the things that you folks are doing and some of the overlapping industries that we all seem to be kind of entering in this crazy time. I do want to end with how I sometimes do, which is with a quickfire round. So I want to shoot some questions at you as quick as possible, and I want you to shoot back a response as quickly as possible. Little thought, whatever comes into your mind. What is one drone use case that people underestimate?
Logistics.
What's the biggest misconception about autonomy?
I think it's not one word, sorry, but I think some people think it's way more advanced than it is today, and some people think it doesn't exist where it exists. So I think people tend to be in other sides when reality is somewhere in the middle.
That's interesting. There's another expression that I like. Nothing is ever as good or as bad as you think. Right? It's
Exactly.
like people. Yeah. What's the bigger bottleneck? Hardware or software?
I think hardware.
US versus Europe versus Israel. Who's ahead?
Oh, that's a big question. I think there's many ways to slice and dice it, but I believe right now U.S. and Israel are fighting together, so let's put them together at the top.
I like that. Finally, last question. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, follow you, see what you folks are up to, and keep in touch?
I think LinkedIn is a great platform. Email, I'm pretty out there, so if people want, I'd be happy to talk with anyone.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put all the links at the bottom to make sure people can click and find you and connect with you after they listen to this. Udi, thank you so much for your time and insights today. It was super interesting to learn all a bit about like the differences in the sectors and some of the things that are going to come out of some of the defense tech areas that we are exploring today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, James. It was a pleasure.